Joining us to discuss the future of mining, please welcome Head of External Affairs, Americas for South32, Judy Brown, with Special Correspondent for Fastmarkets, Andrea Hotter.
Okay, so the future of mining. I think we'll probably put this in context a little bit as well before we start. We're talking here about the Hermosa project. So for the people in the audience that don't know, can you explain what the Hermosa project is and maybe what makes it a little bit strategically distinct in this landscape?
Sure, love to. The Hermosa project is a zinc mine under construction in Arizona. It's about, in Santa Cruz County, about 8 miles north of the Mexican border. And maybe first I'll start off with telling a little bit about South32. For those of that you don't know, it's a diversified mining company based in Australia. It was spun off of BHP, so we're actually like a 10-year-old mining company. But we do operate some of the legacy assets as well as now sort of pivoting towards a portfolio transformation and investing in base metal mines. And Hermosa is a project that in 2024, we did a final investment decision of $2.1 billion to build the Taylor deposit. It has 2 deposits, Clark and Taylor. Clark is a high-grade manganese deposit, and Taylor is a zinc deposit. I mean, one of the reasons why this is significant is because it's probably the most significant zinc deposit under development in the last 15 years. And it's also located in an area in Arizona that doesn't have a lot of mining compared to other parts of Arizona. It has some, and it's, anyway, we have a very good economic development story with the community there, and I think we're really going to basically transform it.
All right, well, that's a very helpful baseline. It sets it into context with what you're doing. Greenfield projects in the US, they're quite uncommon relative to others at the moment, and Hermosa is being built from scratch. So I'm very curious what you're doing differently to build and set this project up, given that you have this blank piece of paper from which you can work.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a blank piece of paper, and it is a greenfield development, but there is some legacy lead mining that occurred there. So one of the things that we did is a voluntary cleanup of some of that area. But we are building an underground mine. We are taking a lot of sort of technology that exists and other best practices from all over, and we're bringing them all together. So we're building an underground mine. It's a stoping backfill mine. So we're going to reduce the amount of tailings we have by refilling them underground. So that's actually like taking the footprint and making it really small. We have about somewhere a total of 700-acre footprint for the life of mine. Mm-hmm. That's actually a lot of large base metal mines have 7,000 to 10,000 acre footprints. So we've really tried to minimize. We're also going to be using a lot of sort of autonomous and remote operations. And so we're going to build a remote operating center, which are not uncommon in the mining industry, but they are not that common here in the United States. Right. And we're putting that in Santa Cruz County. And that's actually going to allow us to hire a lot of people locally and actually decrease the amount of training they're going to have to go through. You have to, basically train for over 2 years to work underground. But with our remote operating center, we'll be able to actually hire a lot of local people, a lot of people who traditionally don't work in the mining industry. And so we're sort of trying to bring all of that together.
Yeah, seen those remote operating centers in Australia before, but
yeah,
as you say, not so much here. And when you're obviously, we say, not quite a blank sheet of paper, but almost. What are you doing differently that you wouldn't have been able to do at a legacy mine that would have been impossible to do if you were trying to retrofit an operation to fit the project that you have?
Well, legacy assets it's very difficult to make changes because when you design a mine, you can make a lot of decisions that then you have to live with for 20 to 30 years. And so that's one of the reasons why a legacy mine, you can be very limited in what you can do, which is one of the reasons why we tried to bring all of the best practices to Hermosa to try and build it in a way that would sort of last from a 20 or 30-year standpoint. It's a 30-year, around a 30-year resource. Things that you can actually design from scratch. One thing that we did do is we consulted with the tribes 3 years before we actually submitted a mine plan of operation. We also consulted a lot with the local community, which is one of the reasons why we ended up doing an underground development.
Great. And mining as well. I mean, people make a lot of assumptions when they hear about mining, don't they? I mean, I suppose, what assumption about modern mining we're talking about here do you find yourself having to correct the most, whether it's with your from amongst your stakeholders? So whether it's the investors, whether it's the community, whether it's, somebody else, the policymakers?
Well, I'll start with the South32, when they invested in Hermosa. I will say that the first perception, which may not be completely off base, but probably not totally true, which is that you can't permit a mine in the United States. So we'll be getting our record of decision in July and hopefully our notice to proceed in August. And we were the first FAST-41 project, the first mining project in FAST-41, and that was a 2-year permitting process. I think that was surprising because, in the Australian press and other places in the world, you read about all of these permitting issues in the United States. So I think those get a lot of attention. So that would be the first sort of misconception. And then really the issue around mining development and open pit mine, large-scale environmental damage, the lack of sort of old school ways of operating, the jobs that they create or don't create. I think people don't really understand what mining is, and I would add that in the United States, it doesn't have a mining DNA the way that Australia or maybe some other countries do, and we really haven't been developing greenfield projects in the United States for 20 years. So I do think that there's a lot of misconception that I would say is kind of heightened here maybe than it would be in other places.
Yeah, and when we were talking backstage earlier, you were talking about how people, when they come to see the project, they're often more surprised than they would have expected at the beginning. So if I was to come and visit, what do you think would actually surprise me the most?
Well, I think what would surprise you is how small the footprint is and how compact it is. I think the other thing that would surprise you is how much activity there is going on in terms of shaft sinking and the fact that we've already basically built the tailings facility, partly because we did that voluntary cleanup. So I think a lot of proposed projects, you just sort of see a lot of dirt fields that someday will be a mine. So I think what will surprise you is how much activity there is and how compact it is.
And in terms of just, you talked about permitting as well, in terms of expectations around and standards around those mines, what do you think has changed the most? Where is the most rigor? Is it the permitting that's become faster than people expected? Is it the community engagement that's come more into focus with a modern mine, developing it? What area do you think is the most kind of in focus, or is it all of the above?
To some extent, it's all of the above, but I mean, the permitting is a rigorous process. I think the issues with permitting is that it's a complex coordination process with many agencies, and that creates a lot of delays and issues because people don't make strategic decisions. Obviously, we're a litigious society, so there's a lot of litigation around these things, and to ask bureaucrats to make decisions around that can sometimes be hard, and that creates a lot of delays. I still think that's a very rigorous process. I think the expectations of communities is actually new. I also think that tribal, the complex consultation that you have to do with tribes, I think is also something you have to be prepared for, and I think you have to start early. And I think one thing that people don't realize is that when you submit a mine plan of operation, you've already decided how you're going to design the mine. And currently, regulations require you to do tribal consultation once you submit the mine plan of operations, which of course is too late. I mean, you've already decided to build it this way or do this, so why are you consulting with me now? So you really have to do, even though there's no statutory sort of requirement, and if there's no agency regulatory action, it's not like the agencies can do the consultation. And in the States, it's a bit projects because it's a government-to-government consultation, but you really need to build those trust and those relationships ahead of time, because once you submit the mine plan of operation, it's too late. And it's the same with your community. It's not just tribal, even though there's actually a regulatory consultation requirement. Even with your local community, you really need to basically decide how you're going to design the mine to satisfy some of the biggest issues. So for example, the Hermosa project, one of the biggest fears was they didn't want a bunch of people moving in to Santa Cruz County, because they have a very particular, it's a border town in Arizona, they have a very particular culture, and they were afraid that it was going to attract a bunch of outsiders. And so we've made a commitment to hire 80% locally from people who live in the county today, which is another reason that drove sort of the automation and the remote operations, because that way we can actually build a workforce with sort of less training timelines, and we can hire people who aren't traditionally in the mining industry.
Yeah, those reassurances are very important, that inclusivity as well. Everybody wants the job as well. So let's talk a little bit about the actual products that you're going to be producing. On the zinc side, zinc is one of those traditional base metals that's been around. Everybody's heard of it, probably in some shape or form, but it often gets forgotten. Do you think it's a little bit underappreciated?
I think it's completely underappreciated. I think zinc is very sexy and people don't realize it. I think a lot of people talk about copper and that, we have this big supply gap coming in copper. Well, we have the same thing happening in zinc, except not enough people are talking about it. But really, when you think about zinc, you really can't build outdoor infrastructure of any kind without zinc. So I think it's a very important metal. And then there's only one other large-scale zinc mine in Alaska that's coming to the end of its life. We really need zinc. As a matter of fact, this discovery now under development, you would basically have to build like 3 Hermosas by 2034 to actually meet that supply gap. So obviously, from our standpoint, we're very bullish on zinc. We're very excited about zinc. We really think it's going to have, as they say with commodities, right, the best, cure for high commodity prices is high commodity prices. So.
You heard it here first. Zinc is the sexy metal. Let's talk about manganese. It's obviously gained a lot more importance over the past few years because of its role in the battery sector, always been important in steel. How are you thinking about manganese strategically?
So South32 is actually a large-scale manganese producer, but most of that goes into catalyzing steel. It has a different use, but battery-grade manganese, it's not just the high grade, but it's actually the purity of the deposit that's important. And when we started the development of Hermosa, we have a manganese cap that sits on top of the zinc deposit, which honestly, when we started, was probably going to be waste. But then once the sort of battery issue started to come up, we were like, well, this is actually a 60-year deposit that could be developed for battery-grade manganese, which we wouldn't do with some of our other manganese assets. And so we've started to develop that project. I think the high purity of it is something that we've done some testing on. We've sent samples to many of the OEMs and battery makers, and we can meet almost any purity requirements that they would need. As a matter of fact, they've actually said, is there any way that you can dial down that purity, thinking that might be cheaper? But so we can, it's a very significant deposit for that battery market, which currently today is all made in China.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of that battery market as well, when we look at that, often there are certain parts of the supply chain that are identified as being, that's where the next wave of value creation has to come. There's a gap in the sector. Now, for these markets that you're dealing in, do you think, starting with manganese and then zinc, do you think the gap is in the mining side with zinc? Is it in the processing, the refining area, or is it even further downstream?
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again?
In terms of the next wave of value creation, that next gap that we will see in...
Oh, that's it. Well, obviously zinc, we have no zinc smelters in the US, and so obviously Korea Zinc has been announced. Obviously I think the processing is important from that standpoint. For manganese, it's a little bit, it's actually we're going to build something that's totally vertically integrated with the processing here. The biggest issue is that there needs to be a North American market in order to sell that high purity grade manganese. And currently there's no PCAM production, which is what those critical minerals go into. So it's PCAM, then cathode. And if that PCAM production isn't here, it doesn't economically make sense to take manganese here, process it, send it to Korea or Morocco, have it put into PCAM, and then brought into the United States. The economics of that don't work. So actually that PCAM production, that midstream, really needs to be developed in North America.
Do you think that's achievable, that the US can create, I mean, that's what we're here to talk about these next couple of days, that resilient, secure supply chain through the supply chain, so that we do actually not have to send products off to the other side of the world and then bring them back in? Do you think it's possible?
I think it's I definitely think it's possible. I also think it's an imperative. I mean, you need batteries, and you need new development in batteries, and obviously higher chemistry, batteries with higher manganese chemistries have lots of benefits, including it's a cheaper, accessible material that can replace other higher, more expensive and harder to get materials. And I think if you have a commercial battery market in North America, then you have national security. I mean, you can't support a sort of battery industry for the defense needs if you don't have a commercial battery market. So you need one in order to support the other.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on, because I'm aware of time, to the permitting aspect, because I think that's something that also we hear an awful lot about. You mentioned Fast41. Mm-hmm. Streamlining federal permitting, increasing transparency. I think I know your answer to this, but I was going to ask you, where has it worked and where has it not? But I think you're probably going to say it's working pretty well. But I'd love to get an assessment from you on what you think of the process and how it's helped.
It's helped a lot. I mean, we've obviously gotten a permit in 2 years. I think when we first started the project, we were assessing a 5.5-year permitting timeline, so it shaved at least 3.5 years off of that. We based that on some of the other NEPA processes that other mines have gone through, and they were all around 5.5 to 7 years for a lot of different delays and reasons. So it's a transparent process. I think when people ask me this, I always say that Fast41 works really well, but it doesn't mean you don't have to, I say, bird dog the process like you would even if you had a non-Fast41 project. So you're always going to hit these sort of bumps in the road, and you have to find a way to work them out. And that is true of a Fast41 process, or it's true of a not Fast41 process. But the one thing is that you have this permitting council that kind of serves as a mediator. I think you also have some accountability. I think you also have some prioritization that you have for Fast41 projects, which I think are helpful.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fascinating. Have there been any areas where it's been harder to apply it, given that you are a different kind of mine that you're creating with a different approach to mining?
It's not really. I mean, I think people have, I think some of our opponents and some of the people in the community have said that it's, Fast41, it has an unfortunate name. It isn't, number one, it's not all that fast. It's not also skipping any steps. You're not sort of doing it at a less stringent level. And I think when you say Fast41, people just automatically think, oh, that's less stringent, or you skipped a bunch of steps. None of that, you don't skip any steps. None of that happens. So I think that's a big misconception with Fast41 that I think we deal with a lot. And that's mainly the issue. I just wish they would, it actually stands for Fixing America's Surface Transportation Fast, because it was in the highway reauthorization bill, but it doesn't really mean that it's all that fast.
Yeah, not lowering the standards in the process as well. I guess my last question for you as well is, if you could change one thing about the process, what would it be to improve it, to make it maybe even faster?
The Fast41 process, or just the permitting process in general?
Well, both.
That's a good question. Ooh, to pick one. I'm just kidding. I think probably I can't really think of one. I mean, probably when you negotiate your permitting timeline, there is a lot of time built in between when you submit your mine plan of operations and when you get your notice of intent to proceed with the permitting process.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a timeline that you could really shave a lot of. There's not a lot of really things, especially if you're prepared. So a lot of times those are designed for if there has to be a lot more sort of evaluations and things that you need. But most people go into a mine plan of operation that they've submitted completely prepared for all of those things.
Right.
So I think there's some areas where you could shave a lot of time. I also think that it also depends on what lead agency you have, but I think there's a lot of, record of decision and then notice to proceed. You could probably shave a lot of time in between those.
Otherwise, a very good review by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think we're out of time now, but Judy, thank you so much. Really
No, thank you. Thank you.